Tom Granger was the town's trusted sheriff. Lily Thompson was a 16-year-old girl searching for someone to believe in. When their secret affair turned into a pregnancy, it set off a chain of events that ended in betrayal, a hidden body in the woods, and a courtroom packed with the truth no one wanted to believe. What began in silence exploded into a scandal that exposed the darkest side of power. Redwood Springs was a quiet town, a place where everyone knew everyone else and life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The streets were lined with modest homes, their lawns well kept, and children played in the parks as the sun set each evening. It was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary, where the biggest concerns were the changing seasons and the upcoming town festival. But beneath the surface of this serene, close-knit community, something far darker was lurking, something that no one could have ever anticipated. Sheriff Tom Granger had been the town's lawman for over 20 years. Tall, with graying hair and a calm, authoritative presence, he was the embodiment of trustworthiness. To the people of Redwood Springs, Granger was the epitome of safety and reliability. He had built his reputation as a dedicated sheriff, handling everything from traffic violations to more serious crimes with a steady hand. He was a man who exuded competence and confidence, and everyone respected him, including the Thompson family. Lily Thompson was a 16-year-old girl, relatively unknown to most of the town except for those who saw her occasionally at the local diner or walking to school. She was quiet and reserved, often keeping to herself with her long brown hair and thoughtful eyes that hinted at a deeper sadness. Lily lived with her father, a mechanic who worked long hours, and her mother, who had been absent both emotionally and physically for most of her life. The Thompsons weren't well off, but they had always gotten by. Lily was a girl in search of something she couldn't quite name. Attention, perhaps, or validation. She had always felt a certain distance from her family, and her friendships with other girls at school were never quite deep. Instead, Lily gravitated toward older people, looking for wisdom, or maybe simply a sense of belonging. One such person was Sheriff Granger. It started innocently enough. They'd cross paths occasionally, usually at town meetings or during local events. Sheriff Granger would nod politely, offer a smile, and maybe exchange a few words of advice about her future. Lily, being naturally drawn to authority figures, appreciated the attention. The sheriff wasn't just any lawman. He was a symbol of power, of control, and that made him fascinating to Lily. His advice felt sincere, and to a girl who rarely felt seen, it was a welcome change. Over time, their interactions became more frequent. It was always small talk at first, but something in the way the sheriff spoke to her began to change. His words lingered a little too long, his smile just a little too warm. He began offering her rides home after school, asking her how she was doing and giving advice on everything from life to love. Lily, though unsure of the boundaries, was flattered. To her, Granger's attention felt like a rare gift, something she had never received from her own father. She felt special, important in his presence. Soon their exchanges grew more personal, and the sheriff would drop by the Thompson house on occasion, sometimes staying for dinner. No one thought much of it. In a town as small as Redwood Springs, such visits were seen as harmless, even courteous. But what others didn't know was that Sheriff Granger's feelings toward Lily were far from professional. The first time Granger's intentions became clear to Lily, she wasn't sure what to make of it. It was late one night when the sheriff came to her window, his voice low and comforting, asking if she was all right. She had been upset about something trivial, maybe a fight with her mother or an argument with a friend, but in that moment, Granger's presence was exactly what she needed. His words, soothing and reassuring, made her feel like he was the only one who truly understood her. It wasn't long before those quiet, comforting words gave way to something more intimate. The sheriff's touch lingered a little too long, and his gaze had shifted from caring to something more predatory. Lily, confused and overwhelmed, didn't pull away. She wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was the overwhelming sense of being seen, of finally feeling like someone cared. Maybe it was the fact that Granger was the first man to ever give her attention like this. In a town where she was largely ignored, his affection felt intoxicating. What followed was a secret, a dangerous one, that would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. Sheriff Granger and Lily began meeting in secret. It wasn't just the occasional stolen moment. It became a regular affair, hidden from the prying eyes of the town. Granger, once a respected figure, became entangled in his own deceit. He told Lily that their relationship had to stay hidden, that it was better for both of them. But the secrecy, the thrill of being caught, only deepened Lily's fascination. She was in too deep to turn back. To the outside world, Sheriff Granger remained the dependable protector of Redwood Springs. But behind closed doors, he was nothing more than a man trapped in his own web of lies and desire. And for Lily, the affair became a twisted escape from a life that had never truly embraced her. What started as a quiet flirtation had turned into something fey. Lily's world shifted the moment she realized she was pregnant. She was only 16, still trying to figure out her place in the world, and now everything felt like it was spinning out of control. At first, she thought it might be a mistake, something that would pass. But as the weeks went on and the signs grew impossible to ignore, reality hit hard. There was no denying it. She was carrying Sheriff Granger's child. Fear consumed her. The excitement and flattery she once felt from the sheriff's attention were gone, replaced by anxiety and isolation. She had no one to confide in. Telling her parents was out of the question. Her father was emotionally distant, and her mother barely acknowledged her anymore. And Granger? The man who had once comforted her now acted cold and cautious. The moment she told him about the pregnancy, his entire demeanor changed. He wasn't the same man who had whispered reassurance to her under dim porch lights. He became quiet, withdrawn, and visibly shaken. Lily had hoped for comfort, maybe a plan, maybe even some hope. But what she got was fear. Granger told her to stay quiet. He insisted they had to be careful, that if the town found out, everything would collapse. For both of them. He talked about his career, his wife, his position in the community. Lily noticed he never mentioned her future, never asked what she needed. It became clear that she was no longer someone he cared for. She was a threat. As weeks turned into months, Lily struggled to hide the changes in her body. Baggy clothes and isolation became her daily routine. She stopped going to school regularly, claiming she was sick. Her teachers grew concerned, but no one pressed too hard. Redwood Springs wasn't a town where people asked uncomfortable questions unless they absolutely had to. The emotional weight of the secret began to wear on her. She felt sick constantly, not just from the pregnancy but from the stress. She stayed up late at night staring at the ceiling, wondering what her future looked like. Every plan she'd ever made, college, travel, freedom, was slipping away. In their place stood fear and the growing certainty that she was alone. Meanwhile, Granger was spiraling. The man who had always been composed and authoritative began making mistakes at work. His deputies noticed he was jumpy and distracted. He snapped during routine traffic stops and canceled meetings without explanation. People started to whisper, unsure of what was going on behind his tightly shut office door. Still, no one dared confront him directly. He was the sheriff. He had power, and in a town like Redwood Springs, power protected people like him. Despite his fear, Granger was also planning. He began pressuring Lily more intensely. He talked about sending her away for a while, maybe to stay with distant relatives or at a place where no one knew her. He said it would be temporary, just until the situation was under control. Lily resisted. She knew what he was really saying. He wanted her gone, out of sight and out of mind. And she understood then that whatever affection he once had for her had died the moment she became a liability. The turning point came when Lily hinted she might tell someone, not to destroy him, but simply because she couldn't handle the pressure alone anymore. She needed help, and she needed someone to know the truth. That single moment, that quiet suggestion, was the beginning of the end. Sheriff Granger's reaction was immediate. His eyes hardened, and his voice took on a tone Lily had never heard before. In that moment, something shifted between them permanently. He was no longer just scared, he was dangerous. Lily sensed it, but she didn't know how far he was willing to go to protect himself. She thought she still had time, but time was already running out. The secret she carried was growing larger every day, and Granger was running out of ways to hide it. The once trusted sheriff and the frightened teenage girl were now bound together by something neither could undo. A baby that symbolized everything they had to lose. And in Granger's mind, the only way to keep it buried was to erase the threat completely. The day Lily disappeared started like any other. The morning air was warm for early summer, and the streets of Redwood Springs buzzed with quiet normalcy. Neighbors tended to their gardens. The local diner served its usual breakfast crowd, and no one suspected that something terrible had just happened. Lily's father assumed she was still sleeping in her room, as she often did lately. When he finally knocked and found her bed untouched, panic didn't set in immediately. It was only when evening arrived and there was still no sign of her that he began to worry. At first, people thought she had run away. She had been acting distant, skipping school and avoiding her friends. Some believed she'd gone to stay with a relative or fled to escape some kind of trouble at home. But as the hours turned into days, the worry deepened. Her belongings were still in her room. She hadn't taken her phone or any money. Nothing about her disappearance made sense. Sheriff Granger took the missing persons report himself. He stood in the Thompsons' living room, asking questions, nodding solemnly, promising he would do everything in his power to find her. He even organized search teams, led community meetings, and gave carefully worded statements to the local news. To everyone else, it looked like the sheriff was doing his job with care and urgency. But to the few who paid close attention, something seemed off. Granger avoided the Thompson family more than necessary. He never stayed long during visits, and when asked about new leads, his answers were vague. People chalked it up to stress, but there was something deeper behind his eyes. Something he was trying hard to hide. Despite the outward search efforts, no solid leads emerged. Search dogs combed the woods. Helicopters scanned the nearby fields. Flyers were posted across town. Yet Lily had vanished without a trace. There were no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, no messages left behind. Her absence became a wound the town couldn't close. She had simply disappeared. But the truth was buried deep in the forest. A week after Lily went missing, a local hiker made a gruesome discovery while walking through the outer edge of the county woods. Partially hidden under brush and leaves was the body of a young girl. Her clothes were torn and her face was unrecognizable from the elements. The hiker called it in immediately. Sheriff deputies arrived on scene, sealing off the area and confirming the worst. Lily Thompson had been found and she was dead. The autopsy revealed she had died from blunt force trauma to the head. There were no defensive wounds. It was quick and violent. She was also several months pregnant. The medical examiner believed she had been dead for at least 6 days, almost exactly the time she'd been missing. The town of Redwood Springs was shaken. The girl they had watched grow up, who had seemed shy and sweet, had been brutally murdered. No one could understand who would do something so horrific. Rumors spread quickly. Some blamed strangers passing through. Others suspected people on the edge of town, but no one thought to look at the man who had sworn to protect them all. Sheriff Granger maintained his role, acting devastated, vowing to find Lily's killer. He told the press they were chasing down leads and promised justice would be served. Yet behind the scenes, Granger was unraveling. Every conversation about the case tightened a noose around him. Every glance from a grieving parent or suspicious deputy weighed heavier than the last. The truth was closing in. Evidence had already begun to surface. Discrete details that didn't fit. Granger's phone records showed calls made to Lily in the days before she vanished. Gas station security footage revealed his car headed toward the woods that same night. And someone, a deputy who had always paid close attention, was beginning to ask the right questions. Sheriff Granger had silenced Lily to save himself. But in doing so, he had created something he could no longer control. A murder investigation that would expose everything he had tried to hide. The investigation into Lily Thompson's murder intensified quickly after her body was found. A wave of grief and disbelief swept through Redwood Springs. Candlelight vigils were held. Her classmates posted tributes online. Her family, devastated and broken, could barely speak to the press. The sheriff's office, now under public scrutiny, worked around the clock, or so it appeared. But something wasn't right. Deputy Mark Ellis, one of the younger officers on the force, had always looked up to Sheriff Granger. He admired his leadership and how the town respected him. But as the case unfolded, Ellis started noticing strange patterns. Files related to Lily's disappearance were missing timestamps. Some reports hadn't been filed properly. Granger was unusually controlling of the investigation, personally approving every piece of information that went out to the public, and shutting down conversations about certain leads. It didn't sit right with Ellis. Acting on a gut feeling, Ellis quietly began looking into the sheriff's behavior. He pulled call logs, traffic camera footage, and department vehicle GPS records. What he found disturbed him. Sheriff Granger A.S. car had been parked near the edge of the forest on the same night Lily went missing. He had never reported being in that area. Worse still, security footage from a nearby gas station showed Granger purchasing cleaning supplies, gloves, and duct tape just 2 hours after Lily was last seen. Ellis hesitated. Accusing the sheriff wasn't something to take lightly, but the evidence kept stacking up. He requested access to Granger A.S. work computer and found deleted emails between Granger and an anonymous burner account, messages that hinted at fear, desperation, and a relationship gone wrong. The language was vague, but it was clear that someone close to Granger was threatening to reveal a secret. Ellis didn't need to guess who that person was. Quietly, Ellis brought his findings to a state investigator. The case was now too big for the local department. An external team was assigned to take over, and Sheriff Granger was placed on administrative leave. The town was shocked. The idea that the very man leading the investigation might be involved in Lily S. murder felt like a betrayal beyond words. People began revisiting every interaction, every memory of Granger and Lily, piecing together moments that now looked suspicious in hindsight. As state investigators dug deeper, the full extent of the relationship came to light. They discovered text messages recovered from Lily's old phone, hidden in a backup cloud account. The messages were heartbreaking and incriminating. They showed a progression from admiration to manipulation. Granger had groomed Lily slowly, disguising his interest as concern, then affection. The messages grew darker as Lily became pregnant. She had been frightened, isolated, and unsure whom to trust. In her final messages, she told him she was going to tell the truth, that she couldn't live with the secret anymore. That was the last message she ever sent. State police obtained a warrant and searched Granger's home and private property. In his garage, they found a stash of Lily's belongings, a bracelet, a hoodie, and an ultrasound photo hidden in an old toolbox. DNA testing confirmed the child was his. The results left no room for doubt. Sheriff Granger was arrested at his home without incident. The man who once symbolized law and order in Redwood Springs was now at the center of its darkest crime. He offered no resistance, no explanation. His silence was chilling. The town watched as he was led away in handcuffs, surrounded by officers who had once respected him. The mask he wore for so long had finally cracked. Underneath it was a man who used his power to prey on the vulnerable and kill to protect his reputation. The truth was no longer buried. It had risen with a force that could no longer be ignored. Sheriff Tom Granger's arrest sent shockwaves through Redwood Springs. A town once defined by its peaceful charm now bore the stain of scandal and murder. The image of Granger being led from his home in handcuffs played on every local news station. His once proud face hardened into something unrecognizable. For a man who had built his identity on law, order, and community respect, it was a stunning fall, one that left the town reeling. The trial became a statewide sensation. Every day, reporters lined the courthouse steps, locals gathered in small crowds, and Lily's family sat silently in the courtroom waiting for justice. The prosecution laid out the timeline in devastating detail. They painted a clear picture of manipulation, abuse of power, and cold-blooded murder. The affair between Granger and Lily was exposed with undeniable evidence: text messages, call logs, and witness statements. Forensic analysts confirmed the pregnancy and matched DNA to Granger. The murder weapon, a tire iron found near the burial site, carried partial fingerprints that couldn't be dismissed. Granger's defense offered little in the way of a true denial. They tried to shift blame, suggesting Lily had been unstable, or that someone else could have killed her. But the evidence was too overwhelming. Every attempt to deflect responsibility crumbled under scrutiny. The jury, visibly disturbed by the victim's young age and the betrayal of public trust, listened intently as prosecutors described how Lily had become expendable the moment she threatened Granger's carefully crafted life. In the courtroom, Granger never showed emotion. He sat still, his expression unreadable, as former colleagues testified against him. Deputy Mark Ellis, the man who first uncovered inconsistencies in the investigation, took the stand with a heavy heart. He spoke about the guilt of not seeing the signs sooner, about how the sheriff had hidden behind his badge to commit unthinkable acts. His testimony was a turning point. The verdict came swiftly: guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, statutory rape, abuse of authority. The judge sentenced Granger to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, the courtroom remained silent. There was no outburst, no dramatic reaction, just the heavy realization that a trusted leader had destroyed lives in the most horrifying way. After the trial, Redwood Springs struggled to heal. Trust in law enforcement was fractured. The sheriff's office saw major leadership changes, and new oversight measures were introduced. Counseling services were offered to students and families affected by the tragedy. A memorial was erected near the school, dedicated to Lily Thompson, a quiet girl whose life was stolen before it had the chance to fully begin. Lily's parents never spoke much to the press, but at the memorial's unveiling, her father shared a short statement. He said Lily wasn't perfect, but she was kind and trusting, and those qualities were used against her by someone she should have been able to count on. He hoped no other family would ever experience what they had endured. The legacy of the crime lingered. People no longer looked at Redwood Springs the same way. The tree-lined streets and familiar faces now held memories of secrets, silence, and a betrayal too deep to forget. But over time, the town began to rebuild. Not by forgetting what happened, but by ensuring that it would never happen again. Lily's story became a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of speaking out, even when the truth is difficult to face. The sheriff who had once protected the town had destroyed it from within, but in the end the truth prevailed and justice, though delayed, was served.